I have a good video for you guys today. Before we get started, let me go ahead and actually pull this up. You need to be getting in on the Rippaverse store sale that we have, the merch sale that we got going on right now, 15% off on all merchandise items. We're waiving shipping for orders of $75 or more. And if you order about 16 domestic, we'll make sure you can get those by Christmas. So go ahead and get in on those. Hats there. All three shirts are there. The posters are back. So be sure to go and check those out. But it's a serious topic. I'm going to be completely honest. I mean, this is something that is massive. Now, keep this in context. For those of you that kept up with the whole Rippaverse ISOM 1 campaign, remember what some of the guys, we had our conflicts with folks that were already in the industry. Keep in mind how those conversations went as we read through this. But this is a thread by an actual comic book pro, okay? So a person that's been in the industry, has done some work for the likes of Marvel, DC, Image, IDW, all of the honchos and the major comic book, let's say, industry. And yet again, we have another example, and I bring this up all the time. There's a new one all the time. People that do the work, the art and such, suffering in terms of their pay and not being able to get money when they feel like they are owed it, and when they maybe have even agreed to contractually. These are problems that we don't have at the Rippaverse, but I'll be sure to expand on that here in a little bit. But let's read. This comes from Will Robson. Again, he has done a bunch of work for the big comic book brands. Has it become industry standard to pay creators ridiculously late for their work? I've struggled all year, and he's got it in this sort of capitalization. All the large companies I work for to get paid on the agreed time, I'm talking months. He says months late. It's sad how nervous I am to even talk about this publicly in fear of being blacklisted for future work. Oh man. But I've heard so many horror stories from other freelance creators recently about fighting for their paycheck, and I need to vent about all of this, or vent this all out, he says, and hopefully raise some awareness to make some serious change. Okay. Now, the first part, imagine that. You being afraid of being blacklisted, that we know it does, applies to a lot of other stuff in the industry. So these people are in these sort of miserable situations, and you got to understand, again, keeping this in context, this is not me saying anything personal to Will. I'm just saying, keep all of this in mind as you see how dirty, grimy, nasty these people are towards folks that are presenting alternatives to what exists in the mainstream. And a lot of them are all in on it, okay? So I hate that we use the term independent, and then we're talking about like Image and IDW and boom. These guys circle all the same talent for the most part, have very similar distribution sort of approaches, and it's largely the same in terms of how they do business. I'm going to continue reading on. Again, I have some more thoughts on this. He says, here's how it works. You're hired to write or draw a book. The deal usually is you have to complete 5 to 10 pages first, and then you will receive a payment for that work a few weeks after completing it. This means that when you start a new project, it's not guaranteed when exactly you'll see your first payment, because depending on the difficulty of the work, this is a team book, locations, crowd scenes, the length of time it takes to create enough pages of work is always fluid. Usually, if you were a pro, you can gamble that your first payment will be 4 to 5 weeks upon taking on the work. Okay, so he's saying that a lot of cases basically expect a month out when you start before you ever see a dime. So you're already looking at each project you take on as a month plus minimum expectancy of payment for half or a quarter of the issue you're working on. Now, this can be annoying, as if you're constantly hopping from title to title, these payments can stagger between each other, and you can find yourself in some financial jams. But recently, I've had what I thought was a stroke of bad luck with getting paid on what the agreed amount of time after finishing work. And I'm not talking a week late. I'm talking 5 to 10 weeks late. These delays have caused me and my family much stress. It's unbelievable. I've dealt with delayed payments in the past from working on smaller companies, but the biggest companies in the business are now delaying payments regularly. And I've really have had enough. Okay, I got you. A project I've worked on recently still hasn't paid me. I was expecting payment for it in mid-November. Remember that 4 to 5 week window of expected first pay I talked about? That means I started the book in October. How do these companies expect me to pay my bills and afford the holidays? I've been constantly living in a state of survival mode all year, with barely being able to afford to get by due to these delays. I just find it ridiculous that I'm a trained and skilled worker who works 10 to 15-hour shifts, 5 to 7 days of the week to hit these ridiculous industry standard deadlines that already take you away from having any sense of a normal family yes, social life, to then have to worry about paying your bills or feeding your family. I mean, I get to draw these iconic characters owned by these large corporations who are making millions off adapting freelancers like myself, art and creativity. But when you're drawing these characters and internally stressing over whether or not you can afford to buy your family Christmas presents this year due to payment delays, enough is enough. I work hard. I hit my deadlines. Pay me. And he goes on to talk about he's not beefing on the editors or anything like that. It's basically the comic itself, a comic book company itself. Please, if you're like me, if you had it with these issues in the comic, please post your story below. I know I'm not the only one struggling. Let's make some real change. You're not going to make any change because these guys are, for the most part, chicken crap. So looking at some of these other companies, if you look at some of the quote tweets on this thread, there's people that have been in the industry that are expressing the same gripe. I'm going to give it to you straight as I can possibly give it to you. It's hard for me, even though I know, and I see what's going on with people that have been a part of even the mainstream comic book industry, and again, some of the issues that they have to deal with. You see all these comic pros who then start coming at you the minute you disassociate yourself from these guys. Certainly if you start to associate yourself with some of the more controversial figures, such as myself. You want to talk about blacklist, that's basically what you get. And all these people have been so protective of the industry. And this is what it got you, a bunch of broke creatives. Now, the reason why I said keep in mind what we had to deal with, I mean, we have been dealing with so many issues, not issues, but folks that were trying to really sabotage what the business was, trying to sow doubt into people. Oh, when is it coming? Sowing doubt into people based on the price. Oh, you charge too much for all this. You know, one thing that even though despite us not being a mega corporation, you know what people don't have to worry about with the Rippaverse? And one, of course, they don't have to worry about getting their items. They're going to get their items. But importantly, the artists, I don't miss payments. I make sure these guys get paid. If there's any hiccups ever, we make sure we get those resolved ASAP. So I make sure they're paid well. I go out of my way to contractually take care of my artists. Stuff, and I'm not going to go into deep details, definitely considering our NDAs and how the business runs. They know, and they'll back me on this. Certainly some of the writers that you will learn about going in the future who are doing some Rippaverse projects. Not that I'm paying them just better than what the big guys or the major indies or any of those guys are paying them, but also that I go out of my way to work into their contracts that some of these guys are getting stuff on the back end. Now, as far as when you pay these guys as a business owner, I've learned very fast, just considering I've been in art and entertainment for a very long time. Everybody works differently. I have a standard over here at Rippaverse Comics in terms of how I make sure these guys get paid. But if I need to adjust it based upon the individual to incentivize them to make sure that they're getting it, because at the end of the day, it's a business, right? So I'm not going to pay anybody for nothing. But I will make sure as you complete your material for the Rippaverse, I'm going to make sure that you get paid. It's baked in to our systems. We have a very streamlined process, so it's not a case of we have to wait months to make sure that you get paid. We make sure you get it, and that's something that I pride myself in. I've talked about the employees that I have on staff and how I make sure that these guys are getting taken care of. I want to give them a very comfortable living environment while also giving them enough money to where they feel like, look, this is legit. This is not some rinky-dink job. They feel good about coming to work, and it is a business. Make no mistake, this is a business. We are here to get work done, but I give them the as realistically as comfortable of work environment that I possibly can, and I pride myself in that. And you know why? It's because I'm a creative myself. And you can imagine that I know how certainly it feels and how you can feel when you are getting screwed over. But when you can couple this with like the starving artist syndrome and all this other stuff, a lot of these guys are getting screwed over. And as they sit up here and gripe about our prices every day, it seems every other week, it seems that there's some comic pro who's sitting there crying about not being able to get some money. But y'all are so protective of that industry. And more importantly, this is where I really take issue with a lot of these guys. And there's nobody in particular, but you see folks tend to disassociate themselves with the mainstream and how nasty some of these folks that are so protective of this. And this is what you guys have facilitated, right? As Mike Barron's dealing with his issues, with the type of books that he's doing. We know what happened with some of the OG kind of Comicsgate, or people that have been a part of that are part of Comicsgate that have done like their own thing, and they had been industry professionals for a long time, and the type of nasty stuff that gets said about them, not because they've necessarily done anything, but because, well, you're associating with a group of people that they deem as evil, and therefore you must suffer, is how they see it. Yet again, we're not seeing a lot of these complaints on my side, like with the Rippaverse side. We're not seeing these issues because I make sure my cats are taken care of. I'm going to give it to you straight again. Like with the music industry, and like so many other entertainment industries, it's based on an old archaic model. And the people that benefit the most from it ain't the people that's doing the actual creative stuff for it. The people that benefit the least are the people that are actually doing the creation. And now some of y'all have gotten so fixated in your mind that this is supposed to be expected, and this should be the case, when really you've just been getting screwed over. And for a lot of y'all, it's been for decades with this industry. Now, there's one way that it can get fixed, but it ain't how y'all think it's going to be. Oh, well, we get all these people to talk up. You know, everybody ain't going to speak up. Risk the fact, and think about that. Y'all have facilitated an industry where a person has to make this sort of asterisk and say, well, I was afraid to say this because I might get blacklisted. Why y'all protective of an industry that you're so scared to even say something that you think is, look, this benefits to all the artists if this is put there on blast, but you so scared. And that's the working environment that y'all facilitated and y'all are so protective of. Anybody has any mild criticism of these mega corporations, y'all are so protected of this. And again, you know who ain't got to worry about getting money? Cliff Richards, Gabe El Taib, all my employees, all the people working on future stuff for the company. Everybody working for doing like my cover work. I'm an artist, my letterer, Eric Weathers. I make sure these brothers get paid on time. And I don't have nearly the access to the money because I'm not tied to some mega corporation like, let's say, the big two are. When I say it's based on our old archaic model, I think it needs to be completely upended. It doesn't make sense. Even the distribution and how things are handled between Random, Penguin House, or distribution channels like Diamond, none of that makes sense. Doesn't make any lick of sense. But people just do it because it's been done that way for a long time, and people are so protective. We had an argument, or rather, that live debate with one of the Rippaverse detractors who ended up embarrassing himself to the point where he deleted his Twitter. That's one of the things that he's sitting here defending. Like, well, you guys are a part of the industry because you're not going through these channels and the proper channels. And it's like those proper channels got you this. And this is a guy griping about the fact that, well, we ain't getting paid. Now, it's hard for me to feel sorry for these guys because, again, they facilitate. I know there are a lot of innocent parties that are part of that. But maybe that's what you need to think a little more in depth with regarding your peers. Because are they going to say something? More than likely not, as they knowingly get screwed over. In fact, it's like the equivalent of everybody's holding a gun at each other. All right, everybody's pointing it at each other, waiting to cancel each other so they can try to get up, one up them, maybe get on a project. It's a dirty, grimy game. And I'm not going to sit here and act like the artists, the writers, and the creators that are part of it ain't part of the problem. No. It's hard to say who's more responsible or less, but y'all are in some way, shape, or form responsible. So is it a situation where you get what it is that you deserve? I would encourage you, if you are watching this, you're one of the hate watchers of me, you don't like me, and you're a part of the industry, get off of that emotional stuff and actually listen to what it is that I'm saying. I promise you it makes sense. And I promise you that what it is that I'm doing is going to be long run, far more beneficial for the creatives, people that want to live off of their creativity. It's going to be far more beneficial for them than it is if y'all continue to keep up with this charade known as the comic book industry in America. Wherever you're viewing the content, I appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, you may be interested in my comic book company, Rippaverse Comics. Our first book and campaign, ISOM #1, brought in $3.7 million with tens of thousands of satisfied customers. Visit Rippaverse.com to check out our store and stay up to date with the latest campaigns from one of the hottest new comic book companies. Also, my first big step towards a parallel economy was the development of my personal website, ericdjuly.com. This entirely replaced my Patreon. Now, if you enjoy this content, please consider becoming a member over at the website. We have an ever-expanding list of perks for various membership tiers, a forum, and a phone app. Some of these perks will even benefit you if you're fans of the Rippaverse. Anyway, I appreciate you so much for being a supporter and or customer. I even got a little love for my haters.